A little girl offered to clean the rich CEO's shoes in exchange for scraps. One morning, Alexander Grant, a rich CEO, stepped out of his house. He was ready to go to work. At the corner of the gate, a small girl was sitting on the ground. Her dress was old, and her face looked tired. In her hand, she was holding a small dirty rag. When Alexander walked past her, the girl looked up at him and said, "Sir, may I clean your shoes? I don't want money, only some food, maybe some scraps." Alexander stopped. No one had ever said something like this to him before. He looked at his shiny shoes, then at the girl. She looked hungry, but her eyes were full of courage. "What's your name?" Alexander asked. The girl sat up straight and said, "My name is Leela. I can make your shoes shine. My mother told me never to beg, always to work. Please, sir, let me clean." Alexander felt something heavy in his chest. The words of the little girl reminded him of his own childhood when his family had nothing. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, Leela. Clean them." Leela quickly bent down and began to clean. Her small hands moved with care. When she finished, she looked up and whispered, "Did I do good, sir? Can I have something to eat now?" Alexander reached into his bag and gave her his breakfast. A piece of bread and some fruit. Leela's hands shook as she took it. She whispered, "Thank you, sir. Thank you." Alexander stood still, watching her eat. That morning, something changed inside him. He didn't know it yet, but this little girl was about to change his entire life. Alexander could not stop thinking about the little girl. All day in his office, he tried to focus on meetings and papers, but Leela's face came back in his mind again and again. Her small voice, her tired eyes, and the way she said, "Never beg. Always work." It touched something deep inside him. That night, when he came back home, he looked at the same spot outside his gate. Leela was not there. The place was empty. For the first time in years, Alexander felt strange loneliness in his heart. The next morning, he stepped outside again. And there she was. Leela sat in the same place, holding the same rag waiting. When she saw him, she quickly stood up and said, "Good morning, sir. May I clean again?" Alexander looked at her carefully. "Leela, did you eat last night?" She lowered her head. "Only a little. My mother is sick. Sometimes she doesn't eat so I can eat. But I want to work more. If I work, maybe she can eat too." Her words cut him like a knife. A child speaking like this, it was not normal. Alexander felt a heavy pain in his chest. He slowly said, "You don't have to clean my shoes every day, Leela." But she quickly shook her head. "No, sir. Please, if I work I feel strong. I feel I am not useless." Alexander bent down to her level and spoke softly. "Leela, you are not useless. Do you understand me? You are strong already." Her eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them fast and smiled. "Thank you, sir. But please, let me earn something." So again, Alexander allowed her. She cleaned his shoes carefully, just like yesterday. And again, he gave her his breakfast. But this time, he added something more. A small sandwich wrapped in paper. "Take this for your mother," he said. Leela's hands shook. She pressed the sandwich close to her chest. "For my mama. Thank you, sir. She will be so happy." Alexander felt something warm spread inside him. For years he lived only for business, money and power. But this little girl, sitting outside his house, was making him remember something more important. Humanity. That night, before sleeping, Alexander stood at his window and looked at the city lights. He whispered to himself, "Why do I feel like this little girl came into my life for a reason?" He did not know yet, but life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. That night Alexander could not sleep well. He kept seeing the picture of Leela holding the sandwich close to her chest. He kept hearing her small voice saying, "For my mama. She will be so happy." The next morning, Alexander stepped outside again. He almost expected her to be there. And yes, Leela was sitting in the same place. Her little body looked weak, but her smile appeared as soon as she saw him. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "I am ready to work." Alexander walked toward her and asked, "Leela, where do you live?" She hesitated. "Not far. Just 2 streets away. We stay in a small room. It's not nice, but it's home." Alexander looked at her carefully. "And your mother? Is she okay?" Leela lowered her head. "She is sick. Some days she cannot even stand. But she tells me not to worry. She says I am her little helper." Something inside Alexander broke. He thought of his own mother years ago, when she worked in a factory and still tried to smile for him. He remembered how powerless he felt watching her struggle. He knelt down in front of Leela and said, "You are not just a helper, Leela. You are brave. Very brave." Her eyes lit up. "Do you really think so, sir?" "Yes," Alexander said firmly. "I do." For the third day Leela cleaned his shoes with her tiny hands. She did it carefully, like it was the most important job in the world. Alexander didn't stop her. He let her finish. When she was done, he gave her food again. But this time, more than before, he handed her a small bag with bread, fruit and milk. Leela gasped,
"This is so much!"
"My mama, she will cry happy tears." Alexander felt his throat tighten. He only nodded, as she ran off with the bag. Alexander stood there watching her disappear around the corner. Something strange was happening to him. He, the powerful CEO who never cared for anything outside his empire, was waiting every morning now, for a little girl named Leela. And he knew deep inside, he wanted to see her again tomorrow. The next morning, Alexander stepped out of his house earlier than usual. He didn't tell himself why, but in his heart he knew, he was waiting for Leela. And there she was, sitting in the same spot, holding the same rag, her small body shivering in the morning air. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Good morning, sir," she said quickly. "I am ready." Alexander smiled softly. "Good morning, Leela. How is your mother today?" Leela's smile faded a little. "She was coughing all night. She says it will go away. But I don't think so." Alexander felt a stab in his chest. He wanted to ask more, but he didn't want to scare her. So he just said, "Let's make sure you both eat today." Leela nodded gratefully and bent down to clean his shoes again. Her small fingers rubbed carefully, moving slowly, like she wanted to make every inch shine. Alexander watched her silently, and for the first time he realized, this was not about the shoes. This was her pride. This was her way of proving that she could give something, not only take. When she finished, Alexander gave her a bigger package this time. Inside was warm bread, cheese, and a small bottle of juice. Leela's eyes went wide.
"Sir, this is too much!"
Alexander shook his head. "No, it's not. Take it. You and your mother need it." Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand. "Thank you, sir. I will make my mama eat first." She clutched the bag tightly and looked up at him again. "You are the first person who sees me. Others walk by. Some tell me to go away. But you stop." Alexander's heart squeezed. He didn't know what to say. He only placed his hand gently on her shoulder and whispered, "You matter, Leela." Her lips curved into the smallest, most fragile smile. Then she ran off toward her street, holding the bag close to her chest. Alexander stood there for a long time, staring at the empty road. He was a man who owned towers, cars, and companies. But that little girl's smile had given him something money could never buy. And deep down, he knew, he wanted to see her again tomorrow. The next morning, Alexander walked out of his house, and once again Leela was waiting. She stood up as soon as she saw him, holding her rag with both hands. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "Good morning, Leela," Alexander replied. He noticed her face looked a little pale. "Did you eat last night?" "Yes," she said with a small nod. "Mama ate too." She was happy. She said, "You must be an angel." Alexander felt a strange warmth in his chest. No one had ever called him anything like that before. People usually called him tough, cold, or too serious. But hearing that a sick mother thought he was an angel made him silent for a while. "Your mother must love you very much," Alexander finally said. Leela smiled. "She does. She tells me stories at night so I don't feel scared. Even when she is sick, she holds my hand." Alexander's throat tightened. He thought of his own mother again, the way she used to sing for him when he was a boy. He hadn't remembered those nights in a long time. Leela bent down and cleaned his shoes again. Her hands moved carefully, even though the shoes were already shining. When she finished, she looked up at him hopefully. Alexander gave her another bag of food. This time he added something new. A small bar of chocolate. He had picked it up on his way out. When Leela opened the bag and saw it, her eyes grew wide.
"Chocolate!"
she whispered, almost in shock. "Mama hasn't let me taste chocolate in a long time." Alexander smiled for the first time in many days. "Then today is a good day." Leela hugged the bag tightly. Thank you, sir. I will share it with Mama. We will eat together. She turned to leave. But before she ran off, she looked back at him and said, You are different from other rich people. You talk to me. You care. I won't forget that. Alexander stood frozen, her words echoing in his mind. Different from other rich people. He watched her disappear down the street. And as he stood there, Alexander knew something was happening to him. His life, which once felt empty despite all the success, was slowly being filled by a little girl with nothing but hope. That night, Alexander sat in his study with papers spread across his desk. Normally, he would be thinking about contracts, profits, and deals. But his mind was somewhere else. He kept thinking about Leela. Her smile when she saw the chocolate. Her voice when she said, You are different from other rich people. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, business didn't feel important. Something else was pulling his heart. The next morning, when he stepped outside, Leela was already there. She waved her hand shyly as soon as she saw him. Good morning, sir, she said. Good morning, Leela. Alexander answered with a soft smile. How is your mother today? Leela hesitated. She was very weak last night. She told me not to worry. But I could see her breathing was hard. Alexander felt worry rise inside him. Leela, has your mother seen a doctor? She shook her head quickly. We don't have money for that. Mama says she will get better with rest. But I know she needs help. Alexander stayed quiet for a moment. He wanted to tell her he could help, but he didn't want to frighten her or break her trust. Instead, he said, Don't worry. We will think of something. Leela bent down and began cleaning his shoes again. Her little hands worked slowly today. She looked tired. When she finished, Alexander handed her another bag of food. This time he added milk and warm soup inside a container. Take this home, Leela, he said gently. Make sure your mother drinks the soup. Her eyes filled with tears. She held the bag close and whispered, Sir, why are you so kind to me? Alexander paused. No one had asked him that before. He didn't even know the answer himself. After a moment, he said quietly, Because once, a long time ago, I was like you. And someone was kind to me. Leela stared at him with wide eyes. Really? You were like me? Alexander nodded slowly. Yes, life was very hard. But kindness saved me. And now maybe I can pass it on. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then Leela smiled through her tears. Then I will never forget you, sir. She ran off, clutching the food tightly, and Alexander stood at the gate watching her. Deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. That evening, Alexander could not stop thinking about what Leela had said. My mama's breathing was hard. The word stayed in his mind like an echo. He paced around his house, restless. He was a man who could buy almost anything. Yet here was a child and her sick mother only 2 streets away, and he felt helpless. The next morning, he stepped outside earlier than usual. Leela was there again. Sitting on the ground with her rag. When she saw him, she jumped up quickly and said, Good morning, sir. Good morning, Leela. Alexander replied. Studying her closely. She looked tired, her eyes darker than yesterday. Did you sleep well? She shook her head. Mama coughed all night. I tried to rub her back. But she didn't get better. I was scared. Alexander felt his chest tighten. He could see that she was trying to be brave, but she was just a child. Leela, he said softly, I think your mother needs a doctor. I can help. Her eyes widened. She looked nervous. But sir, we don't have money for doctors. And Mama doesn't like strangers. Alexander bent down, lowering his voice. Listen, Leela. I am not a stranger anymore, am I? I just want to make sure your mama is safe. You trust me, don't you? She bit her lip, then slowly nodded. Yes, sir. I trust you. Relief washed over Alexander. He reached into the bag he had prepared that morning. Inside was food as always, but also medicine that his assistant had bought. Give this to your mother for now. It might help with her coughing. And tomorrow, if she allows, I will send a doctor to see her. Leela held the bag carefully, her little hands gripping it tight. Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time they were not only sad, they carried hope. You are too good, sir. I don't know why God sent you to us. But I think maybe he did it to save my mama. Alexander felt something stir deep inside him. He reached out and placed his hand gently on her small shoulder. Maybe God sent you to save me too, Leela. She looked up at him, confused but smiling. Then she cleaned his shoes like she always did, and when she finished, she whispered, "I will tell Mama you are our friend." Alexander watched her run down the street, the bag clutched tightly to her chest. And for the first time in many years, he whispered a silent prayer. Something he had not done since he was a boy. That night, Alexander sat by the window of his big, quiet house. The city outside was alive with lights, but his mind was far away, in a small room 2 streets over, where Lila and her mother lived. He wondered if the medicine had helped. He wondered if they had eaten the food. And he wondered why, for the first time in so many years, he cared so much. The next morning, as always, Lila was there waiting. She looked tired but smiled as soon as she saw him. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "Good morning, Leela," Alexander replied. "How is your mother today?" Her face lit up a little. "She slept better last night. The medicine helped her. She told me to say thank you. She said you are a blessing." Alexander felt a strange warmth in his heart. He nodded slowly. "I'm glad to hear that. Your mother is very strong." Leela's smile grew wider. "She is. Even when she is sick, she says I must keep going. She says one day everything will change." Alexander looked at her carefully. "Do you believe that, Leela? That everything will change?" She hugged her rag close to her chest and said softly, "I have to believe it. If I don't, I will lose hope." Her words cut deep into Alexander's heart. He had everything money could buy, but this little girl, with nothing but scraps and a sick mother, carried more strength in her small body than most adults he knew. "Lila," Alexander said gently, "you are already stronger than most people I have met." Her cheeks turned pink at his words. She bent down and began cleaning his shoes again, her small hands moving carefully. When she finished, Alexander gave her the food he had prepared. This time, warm bread, fruit, and another bar of chocolate. Her eyes sparkled when she saw it. "Chocolate again, Mama will smile today." Alexander smiled back, then asked, "Lila, do you like to read? Do you go to school?" Her face fell. She shook her head. "No, sir. I wanted to, but Mama couldn't pay. Sometimes I watch other children going to school, and I imagine I am one of them. Maybe one day." Alexander felt his chest tighten again. A child her age should be learning, laughing, and dreaming, not sitting on cold ground cleaning shoes. He thought to himself, "This cannot continue. I must do something." But he didn't say it out loud. Not yet. Instead, he gently patted her head and whispered, "One day, Leela, you will go to school. I promise." Her eyes widened, and she stared at him as if she wasn't sure if she should believe such a big promise. But then, slowly, she smiled. "If you say so, sir, then maybe it's true." And with that, she ran off down the street, clutching the food close to her chest. Alexander stood there for a long time, staring after her. For the first time in years, his heart carried a new kind of weight, not of money or power, but of responsibility. The next day, Alexander stepped outside, but this time something was different. Leela was not sitting at her usual spot. The pavement near his gate was empty. He looked around, waiting. But she didn't appear. For the first time in many mornings, Alexander felt uneasy. He stood there, checking his watch, then walked back and forth near the gate. Still no sign of her. His chest grew heavy. Finally, after almost half an hour, he saw her running down the street. Her hair was messy, her steps slow. But she carried the rag in her hand as always. "Lila," Alexander called out. She stopped, then hurried toward him, breathing hard. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm late today. Mama was not feeling well. I couldn't leave her until she fell asleep." Alexander knelt down quickly, concern clear on his face. "Is she worse, Leela?" The little girl nodded sadly. "Yes, she was coughing so much. I didn't know what to do. I just stayed beside her and prayed." Alexander's chest ached. He wanted to tell her not to worry, that he would take care of everything. But he knew he had to move carefully. Trust had to grow slowly. "Leela," he said softly. "You did the right thing. Your mother is lucky to have you." Her small eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them quickly and forced a smile. "Thank you, sir. May I clean your shoes now?" Alexander hesitated. Her face was pale, her little hands shaking, but he nodded. "Only if you want to." "I do," she said firmly. Then she bent down and began polishing the leather. When she was done, Alexander handed her a bag, heavier than usual. Inside were sandwiches, fruit, milk, and more medicine. Leela gasped. All this for us? Yes. Alexander said gently, take it. Make sure your mother eats. She hugged the bag close to her chest and whispered, Sir, if I could, I would give you something too. But I don't have anything. Alexander felt his throat tighten. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said, You already gave me something, Leela. You gave me a reason to care again. Her eyes widened at his words. She didn't fully understand, but she smiled softly. Then, after whispering another thank you, she ran off down the street. Alexander stood there, watching her disappear, his heart heavy with worry for the mother he had never met. He knew it could not go on like this much longer. Something had to be done. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He kept thinking of Lila's pale face, her shaky hands, and the way she whispered about her sick mother. He turned in bed again and again, staring at the ceiling. Finally, he sat up and whispered to himself. I can't just stand by anymore. I need to see her mother with my own eyes. The next morning, when Leela came, Alexander greeted her with a smile. But instead of sitting down for the usual shoe polish, he crouched to her level. Leela, he said gently, may I walk you home today? I'd like to meet your mother. Her eyes widened in surprise. She hugged the bag he had given her yesterday and shook her head nervously. Sir, no. Our house is very small, not good for someone like you. People might laugh. Alexander's voice softened. I don't care about people, Leela. I only care about you and your mother. For a moment, she stood frozen, biting her lip. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay. But promise you won't say anything bad when you see our place. I promise. Alexander said without hesitation. After she finished her little work, Leela led him through the narrow streets of the city. The sun was hot, the lanes crowded, but Alexander followed her carefully. He noticed how people stared at him. His neat suit, his polished shoes, out of place in that poor neighborhood. But he didn't care. Finally, they reached a small, broken-down building. Paint was peeling from the walls, windows cracked, and the steps were uneven. Leela pushed the door open and whispered, Mama, I'm home. Inside, the room was dim. A thin woman lay on a mattress in the corner, coughing softly. Her face was pale, her body weak, but her eyes still carried warmth when she saw her daughter. Mama, Leela said softly, kneeling beside her. This is the kind man I told you about. The one who gives us food. The woman tried to sit up, but Alexander quickly stepped forward. Please, don't get up, rest. She gave him a tired smile. Sir, you are too kind. Thank you for helping my little girl. Alexander's heart broke at the sight. He had seen many faces in business meetings, in boardrooms, in parties. But none moved him like this fragile mother and her brave child. He sat quietly for a moment, then said firmly, Mom, you don't need to thank me. From now on, you are not alone, I will help, both of you. Tears filled the woman's eyes. She whispered, Why would you do this for us, sir? We are strangers. Alexander paused, his voice low but steady. Because once, I lost someone I loved, and I couldn't save her. I won't make the same mistake again. Leela looked up at him, confused, but something in his words made her hold his hand tightly. And in that small broken room, Alexander silently made a vow, he would change their lives. The next morning, Alexander made a call from his office. His voice was calm but firm. Dr. Harris, he said, I need you to visit someone today. It's urgent. A little girl's mother is very sick. I'll send you the address. The doctor didn't argue. Nobody ever said no to Alexander Carter. By afternoon, Alexander was back in the same poor neighborhood. Leela's face lit up when she saw him return. You came again, sir. He smiled. I promised. Didn't I? Behind him, the doctor and a nurse carried medical bags. Leela's mother tried to protest weakly, embarrassed by the attention. Sir, this is too much. But Alexander gently raised his hand. No more arguments. Please, let them check you. The doctor examined her carefully, asked questions, wrote notes, and finally turned to Alexander. She has been ill for a long time. With proper treatment and medicine, she can recover. But it will take time. Alexander nodded. Do whatever is needed. Money is not a problem. The nurse started setting up, giving the woman medicine and fluids. Leela stood in the corner, her small hands pressed together as if she was praying. When the doctor finished, Alexander knelt down beside Leela. "See. Your mama will get better now. I promise." Her eyes shimmered with tears. She whispered, "Nobody ever cared about us like this. Not even our neighbors. Why are you so kind to us, sir?" Alexander took a deep breath. He looked at her and said softly, "Because kindness is the only thing worth giving. And because you remind me of something I lost a long time ago." Leela tilted her head, curious, but she didn't ask more. Instead, she suddenly hugged him. Small arms wrapping around his neck. For the first time in many years, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in his cold, busy life. Warmth. That night, as he returned to his mansion, the house felt emptier than ever. The big rooms, the expensive paintings, the grand furniture. None of it gave him peace. But in his heart, the memory of a little girl's hug stayed. And he knew deep down, his life was beginning to change. 2. Alexander couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Leela's face, her smile, her hug, her small hands holding his suit. It shook him in a way he didn't expect. Next morning, he skipped his usual board meeting. His secretary was shocked. "Sir, the directors are waiting." Alexander replied flatly. "Tell them business can wait." He drove himself back to the poor neighborhood. The black car stood out on the broken street. Children playing outside stopped and stared. Inside the small house, Leela was feeding her mother soup. She looked up, surprised. "Sir? You came again." Alexander smiled faintly. "I told you, I don't break promises." Her mother struggled to sit up. "Sir, you shouldn't trouble yourself." He interrupted gently. "It's not trouble. It's choice." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Nobody ever chose us before." Leela tugged his hand. "Will you stay a little while?" Alexander hesitated. For the first time, he put his phone aside. He sat on the floor next to them. They ate together on simple plates. For a man who owned half the city, it was the poorest meal. But it tasted warmer than any dinner he'd had in his mansion. For the first time in years, Alexander Carter felt human again. The morning sun spilled through the cracks of the small window. Alexander had barely slept, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel restless. He watched as Leela carefully folded a worn-out blanket. She moved with the seriousness of an adult, though she was only a child. "Do you do everything here by yourself?" he asked softly. Leela nodded. "Mama is too weak. I clean, I cook. Sometimes I go outside to find leftover bread." Her words struck him like a hammer. A child speaking like a grown woman, burdened, yet smiling. Alexander leaned forward. "And school? Do you study?" Leela lowered her eyes. "No. They said I can't come without money. But I learn from old books." She rushed to a corner and brought a torn notebook. Inside were neat letters, numbers, and shaky drawings. He flipped through the pages slowly. "You taught yourself this?" She nodded proudly. "Mama helps me sometimes when she feels better." Alexander's chest tightened. He had attended the most expensive schools in the country. Yet this little girl, with nothing but scraps of paper, showed more hunger to learn than anyone he had ever met. Her mother coughed, weak and tired. Alexander instantly poured water into a cracked glass and handed it over. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "But why are you doing this, sir? You are a man of great power. Why bother with people like us?" Alexander froze. The question dug deep. For years, he had lived behind walls of glass towers and marble floors. He had forgotten faces like theirs even existed. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "But when I saw your daughter, it felt like something inside me woke up." The woman smiled faintly despite her weakness. "Sometimes God sends strangers for reasons we can't see." Leela tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "Sir, can I ask something?" He looked at her. "Of course." She bit her lip nervously. "What's it like to live in a big house? With lights that never go out, with food you don't have to fight for?" The innocence in her voice broke him. He wanted to answer truthfully. But he realized his mansion had never felt like home. The lights were cold. The meals were silent. "Honestly," he said, "it feels empty." Leela tilted her head. "Empty. But you have everything." Alexander looked into her wide eyes. "No, little one. Everything without love is nothing." Silence filled the room. The girl's mother closed her eyes, whispering a prayer under her breath. After a long pause, Alexander stood up. I want to help you, both of you, not with pity, not with charity, but with respect. The woman looked alarmed. We cannot accept money we didn't earn. He shook his head. Not money. Opportunity. Leela belongs in a school, not on these streets. And you deserve proper care, not suffering in silence. Leela's eyes lit up. School. Alexander smiled for the first time that morning. Yes, and not just school, the best education. You'll have books, teachers, friends. Everything you need. The little girl's hands trembled as she clasped them together. Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my life, he replied. Her mother wept quietly, trying to hide her tears. You don't know what this means to us. Alexander took a deep breath. In that moment, he realized this wasn't about helping strangers. It was about saving himself too. For years, he had been drowning in boardrooms, profit charts, and hollow applause. Now, sitting in this broken house, he felt more alive than in all his victories combined. Leela suddenly ran to a small box in the corner. She pulled out a tiny cloth pouch and placed it in his hands. What's this? He asked. My treasure, she whispered. Some shiny stones I found, a button, and a broken bracelet. I want you to keep it. For remembering us. Alexander stared at the pouch. His throat tightened. This was all she had. Yet she gave it away without hesitation. Slowly he knelt down to her height. No, Leela. This is too precious. You keep it, and one day, when you're grown, you'll show me something greater. Your first book, your first achievement. That will be your real gift. Her eyes sparkled. Brighter than the morning sun. I promise, sir. They sat together in silence, and for the first time, Alexander didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a man with purpose. Later that day, when he stepped out of the house, children gathered around his car again. But this time, he didn't drive away quickly. He stopped, rolled down the window, and smiled at them. Study hard, he said gently. Your lives can change too. The children laughed and waved, chasing the car as it rolled away. Inside, Alexander Carter gripped the steering wheel tightly. He had made countless deals in his life, but this silent promise to a little girl, was the most important one he had ever made. And he knew he would not fail her. Alexander sat in his office, staring at the city skyline. The tall glass windows reflected the golden light of the late afternoon, but he could not focus on the beauty outside. His mind kept going back to the moment he first saw Lily on the street. A little girl, holding a broken brush, offering to shine his shoes for scraps. That image had taken root inside him, deeper than any deal, any business meeting, or any contract ever could. He leaned back in his chair, but rest did not come. The leather seat felt heavy beneath him, as if the weight of his choices pressed down harder than the chair itself. He had all the money in the world, all the luxury. But he could not stop thinking about the truth Lily had revealed. The life of struggle, the hunger, the nights of cold pavements she had lived through. His secretary knocked softly on the door. Sir, the investors are waiting on the call. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment. Once, nothing in the world could make him miss an investor call. But now, he found himself saying, tell them I'll call back later. The secretary looked surprised but nodded and left. Alexander opened his drawer and pulled out a small object. It was the shoeshine brush Lily had left behind that first morning. He had kept it, though he didn't know why at the time. Now he did. It reminded him that his wealth meant nothing if he could not change the life of even one child like her. He stood, pacing the room. The silence of his office was loud, filled with questions. Who was he really? A man defined by his empire, or someone who could use it for something bigger? For years he had thought success was numbers, towers, cars, and meetings. But Lily had shown him success could be something else. Compassion, humanity, a choice to give when he didn't have to. Alexander walked toward the window again, watching people move like ants far below. He wondered how many of them had their own Lily waiting at home. How many children struggled unseen in the shadows of the tall buildings he and others like him had built. He thought about his own childhood, the days when he had less, when he too had felt invisible. That memory hit him hard. He had buried it deep under years of ambition. But Lily had uncovered it with just one innocent act. The next morning, Alexander made a decision. He arrived not at his office, but at the small shelter Lily and her mother were staying in. The place was crowded, with broken walls and creaking beds. The smell of damp wood and thin soup lingered in the air. Lily was sitting near the doorway, trying to fix the same brush with a piece of string. Her face lit up when she saw him, though she quickly looked down, as if unsure if she was allowed to smile. Alexander knelt down, lowering himself so that his eyes met hers. "Lily," he said softly, "you don't have to shine shoes anymore. Not mine. Not anyone's." She looked confused. "But how will I help Mama? We need food." Her words pierced him deeper than any deal gone wrong. He took a deep breath and said, "From now on, you don't have to worry about scraps. You and your mother deserve more. You deserve a home, a future." Tears filled her small eyes, though she tried to hide them by biting her lip. Her mother, standing nearby, covered her mouth with her hand, unable to speak. Alexander continued, "I want to help. Not just with food today, but with school for you, with work for your mother. With a chance for both of you to live without fear." For the first time in years, Alexander felt lighter. This was not charity. This was humanity. This was the reason behind all the wealth he had built. It was never about towers and cars. It was about moments like this. Lily's mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Alexander looked at Lily, then at her mother, and said, "Because once, I was not so different. And because no one should ever have to trade dignity for survival." The room went silent. The air felt thick with gratitude, with disbelief, with hope. Lily clutched his hand, small fingers wrapping around his much larger ones, and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Alexander." For the first time in a long time, Alexander smiled, not the polite smile for cameras or the cold smile for business victories, but a real one. From the heart. That night, as he returned to his penthouse, he didn't feel like the same man. He looked at the empty walls, the polished floors, the glittering chandeliers, and realized how hollow it all seemed compared to the warmth in Lily's eyes. He sat down, pulled out his phone, and made calls. Calls to set up a scholarship, to arrange proper housing, to open a foundation in her name. But even deeper than that, he made a silent promise to himself. This was only the beginning. Alexander sat in his office that morning, but his mind was not calm. The numbers on the reports meant nothing. The deals in front of him felt empty. All he could think about was the little girl, Lily, and the way she had looked at him when she said she only wanted scraps. That voice still echoed in his head. For the first time in years, Alexander questioned himself deeply. He was rich, powerful, respected, but why did he feel so hollow inside? Why did one little child shake his whole world? He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He remembered his own childhood. He was not born rich. He had grown up in a small house with a single mother who worked 2 jobs. He remembered nights when they had little food. And he had felt hungry. He remembered how his mother always gave him her portion, and told him she wasn't hungry. Only later, as he grew up, he understood the sacrifice she made. Maybe that was why Lily's words hit him so hard. They reminded him of his own struggle, his own pain. For years Alexander had buried those memories under success. Under money, under a lifestyle that impressed the world. But now, seeing Lily, those walls broke. He could not stop thinking. How many more children were out there like her? How many little girls and boys were sitting on sidewalks, not asking for toys, not asking for luxuries, but only for scraps of food? He stood up suddenly, restless. He looked out of the tall glass window of his office tower. The city moved fast below cars, people, noise. But in all that movement, so many silent cries went unheard. He realized he had lived blind for too long. Alexander decided he could not just sit in his office today. He picked up his coat, ignored the calls of his assistants, and walked out of the building. He needed fresh air. He needed to breathe. Most of all, he needed answers. His car was waiting outside. But this time he told the driver to take him not to the usual business district, not to the wealthy side of the city, but to the neighborhoods he hadn't seen in years, the poor areas. The driver looked surprised but obeyed. As the car moved, Alexander looked out of the window at the streets he had once walked as a boy. Cracked sidewalks, old shops, people working hard, just to survive. His chest grew heavy. Finally, he asked the driver to stop near a small community park. He stepped out, and people looked at him with curiosity. A man in a sharp suit, polished shoes, standing in a place where suits rarely came. But Alexander didn't care. He walked slowly looking around. Children played with worn-out balls. Mothers sat on benches, worried about bills. He saw faces tired but strong. He saw lives that had been ignored by the rich side of town. And then, his eyes fell on Lily again. She was sitting under a tree, her little hands holding a rag, polishing old shoes someone must have given her. She looked up and gasped when she saw him. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if she should run or smile. But then, carefully, she stirred. She said softly, I didn't expect you here." Alexander's throat tightened. He walked closer and crouched down to her level. "Lily," he said, his voice gentle. "You don't need to clean my shoes. Not today. Not ever again. I came here to see you." Her small eyes widened with confusion. "Why?" "Because you reminded me of something," Alexander whispered. "You reminded me of who I used to be. And you reminded me of what I lost on my way up." Lily blinked. She didn't fully understand his words, but she felt his sincerity. She looked at her hands. Embarrassed. "I just wanted to help," she murmured. "And you did," Alexander said, his eyes shining. "You helped me more than you know." For a long moment, he just sat there looking at her. He realized she wasn't just one child in need. She was a symbol of so many children who had no one to protect them. He knew he couldn't change the whole world, but maybe he could start with her. Maybe he could start somewhere. "Lily," he said softly, "would you like to come with me? Just for today. I promise you'll be safe. I want you to have a warm meal, not scraps." Her eyes widened again. Fear and hope mixed inside her. She glanced around as if searching for permission from the world. "A real meal?" she whispered. Alexander nodded. "Yes, a real meal. And more than that, I want to hear your story. I want to know who you are." Slowly, nervously, Lily nodded. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, a small shy smile touched her lips. Alexander reached out his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, she placed her tiny hand in his. It was rough, cold, fragile. He closed his fingers gently around it. As they walked toward his car, people stared. A billionaire CEO. Hand in hand with a little street girl. It was a sight no one could ignore. But Alexander didn't care about whispers or stares. For the first time in years, he felt alive. When they sat in the car, Lily pressed her face to the window, amazed by the smooth seats, the quiet hum of the engine. Alexander watched her wonder and felt something stir inside him. Something he thought he had lost forever: compassion. As the car drove away, Alexander knew this was only the beginning. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. And so was Lily's. Alexander sat at his desk late into the night, the city lights glowing outside his office window. He had just returned from a long meeting. But his mind wasn't on business deals or stock reports. His thoughts kept circling back to Lily. Her small hands. Her shy voice. The way she had looked up at him, offering to clean his shoes for scraps. That moment had changed everything. For the first time in years, Alexander felt like the walls of his heart were cracking. He remembered his own childhood, the lonely nights, the hunger that gnawed at him when his parents had nothing. And now, here was Lily, living the same pain he once endured. He couldn't ignore her anymore. The next morning, Alexander made a decision. Instead of sending his driver, he personally drove his car to work. But he didn't go straight to the office. He stopped at the same street corner where he had first seen Lily. And there she was. Sitting on the cold pavement, her dress torn, her face pale. She held a small rag in her hand, ready to polish anyone's shoes who passed by. People walked past her. Some glancing, some ignoring, as if she didn't exist. Alexander's chest tightened. He stepped out of the car and walked toward her. "Lily," he said softly. She looked up, surprised. "Mister, you came back?" Alexander knelt down in front of her, ignoring the stares from people passing by. "I told you I would," he said gently. "You don't belong here. You don't belong on the streets." Her eyes filled with confusion. "But where else can I go?" Alexander hesitated. He didn't have the full answer yet. But he knew one thing for sure. She was not going to be left here another day. "Come with me," he said firmly. Lily clutched the rag tightly. But I haven't cleaned anyone's shoes today. I won't have food. Alexander's voice broke. You don't have to clean shoes anymore, Lily. I'll make sure you never go hungry again. She stared at him, disbelief written all over her face. Why would you help me? Because. Alexander whispered. Someone once helped me when I was just like you. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the city faded. And it felt like only the two of them existed in that instant. Finally, Lily nodded slowly. Her small fingers reached out and touched Alexander's hand. Okay, I'll come. Alexander lifted her gently, placing her inside the car. As the engine started, Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the streets rush by. She had never been inside such a car. Her eyes widened at every passing building, every light, every sound. Alexander glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She looked so fragile. Yet there was a strength in her eyes. The strength of a child who had survived more than most adults ever could. When they reached his mansion, Lily froze. The gates opened slowly, and the enormous house came into view. Marble floors, tall glass windows, and a garden full of roses greeted them. Lily's lips parted in shock. This is your house. Alexander smiled gently. Yes. And from today it's your home too. Her eyes filled with tears, she shook her head. No, I can't. I don't belong here. I'll break something. I'll get in trouble. Alexander crouched down to her level. Lily, listen to me. You belong here more than anyone. You deserve safety. You deserve warmth. And you deserve love. The word love made her chest tighten. It had been so long since she felt it. A maid came forward, but Alexander stopped her with a raised hand. He didn't want Lily to feel like a guest. He wanted her to feel like family. He took her by the hand and led her inside. Room by room, hallway by hallway, Lily's wonder grew. She touched the polished banister, the silk curtains, the shining tiles. She had never seen such beauty. Finally Alexander opened a small bedroom with soft colors, toys, and a warm bed. He had ordered it prepared the night before. Lily stepped inside slowly. This is for me. Alexander nodded. Yes, Lily. All of this is for you. Her legs trembled. She ran to the bed and pressed her face into the pillow. For the first time in forever, she smelled fabric that was clean. Warm, safe. She turned to Alexander, her tiny voice breaking. No one has ever done this for me. Alexander walked over, gently brushing her hair back. Get used to it, Lily. Because from now on, you'll never be alone again. That night, Alexander stood outside her room, watching through the slightly open door. Lily lay curled under the blanket, her chest rising and falling with the soft rhythm of sleep. For the first time in years Alexander felt peace. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, Alexander stood by the large window of his office. The city stretched out beneath him. His thoughts were not on the meetings or the contracts waiting on his desk. Instead, they were with Lily. He could still see her small hands holding the cloth. Still hear her soft voice saying she only wanted food in return. That image had become something he could not shake off. He knew she deserved more than what she had been given in life. He had spent years building empires, acquiring companies, and increasing wealth. But all of it suddenly felt empty compared to one child sitting alone in the street. The truth gnawed at him. He had resources that could change everything for her. By mid-morning, Alexander called his assistant and gave an unusual order. He wanted every detail about Lily's background, who she was, where she lived, and what her situation truly was. Within hours the report landed on his desk. As he opened the file, his chest tightened. The papers revealed a life harder than he had imagined. Lily had no parents left. Her mother had passed away years ago, and her father had abandoned her shortly after. She had been moving between temporary shelters, sometimes sleeping in corners of shops or streets, sometimes taken in by kind strangers for a night or two. There was no stability, no safety. She had learned survival at an age when most children were learning their ABCs. Alexander pushed the file away, unable to read further. He leaned back in his chair and pressed his fingers to his temples. He could see her innocent face in his mind. She had carried herself with quiet dignity, even while offering to clean his shoes for scraps. That strength in her eyes was something he respected. That evening, he visited the place near his building where she usually sat. The sun was setting, painting the streets in soft gold. And there she was, sitting on the same spot, knees tucked to her chest, eyes scanning the ground. She looked up when she saw him. "Mr. Alexander," she said quietly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "You came back." "Yes," he replied, walking closer, his voice calm but steady. "I said I would." She looked at him, uncertain but hopeful. "I don't have much today." People didn't drop any scraps. Alexander crouched in front of her, looking into her eyes. "Lily," he said gently, "you shouldn't be waiting for scraps. You deserve real food, real care. And I want to give that to you." Her little face froze in confusion. "Why?" she whispered. "Because someone should have done it long ago." Alexander answered, his voice thick with emotion. "Because you're a child. And no child should ever feel like food is something they have to beg for." She blinked, trying to process his words. Her small fingers twisted the edge of her worn dress. "Are you saying you'll help me?" Alexander nodded firmly. "Not just help you for a day, Lily. I want to make sure you never sit here like this again. You'll have a safe place to live. Food, school. Everything you should have always had." Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand, as if afraid to look weak. "No one has ever said that to me before." Alexander's chest tightened. He reached into his coat pocket, and pulled out a small wrapped sandwich he had brought with him. "Eat this first," he said softly. "And then tomorrow, you'll come with me." She took the sandwich slowly, as if afraid it might vanish if she touched it too quickly. She unwrapped it carefully and took a small bite. The way her face lit up with simple joy cut Alexander to his core. Something so ordinary to him was extraordinary to her. He sat beside her in silence as she ate. The streetlights flickered on, and the city buzzed around them, but for Alexander, time slowed. Watching Lily eat, watching her trust him little by little, it stirred something in him that no business victory ever had. When she finished, she looked up at him again. "Do you promise?" she asked, her voice small but serious. "Do you promise I won't be left alone again?" Alexander looked her straight in the eye. "I promise. Lily. You'll never be alone again." The words came out not just as a vow but as a decision that would change both their lives forever. That night, as he returned home, Alexander lay awake thinking about the next steps. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change. He had already decided. Lily wasn't just going to be helped. She was going to be part of his life. And deep down, he knew she would change him as much as he would change her. The rain had stopped that morning, leaving the city streets glistening with puddles that reflected the sky like mirrors. Alexander stepped out of his townhouse. His suit sharp as always, but his mind heavy with thoughts that refused to quiet down. The image of Lily's small hands clutching the rag, her voice whispering that she would clean his shoes for scraps, still echoed inside him like an unfinished story. That moment had changed something deep within him. He was no longer simply the CEO people admired from afar. He was a man who had been given a chance to see life through a little girl's eyes. Hungry, innocent, and yet so full of hope. As his car pulled up, Alexander asked his driver to take a detour. "Not the office yet," he said quietly. The driver looked back in the mirror, surprised, but nodded. Alexander had always been predictable. Straight to the glass tower where meetings stacked one after another. Where decisions shaped markets. But today, he wanted something different. They drove past tall buildings, the streets buzzing with people rushing to their own lives. Finally, they slowed near the corner where Lily had first appeared in his life. But the small figure was not there. The bench was empty, the steps bare. A strange tightness gripped his chest. He asked around. A shopkeeper shook his head. "The little girl. Haven't seen her today." Alexander couldn't explain why his heart sank so heavily at those words. He realized then how much the sight of her had already become a part of his days. How strange, he thought, that a child with nothing could leave such a void in the life of a man who had everything. Hours later, back at his office, he tried to lose himself in work. Papers covered his desk, emails kept pouring in, but his focus scattered. Every line he read blurred into the image of Lily's big, innocent eyes. Finally, he closed the laptop and leaned back. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself. That evening, instead of retreating to his mansion, He walked through the quieter part of the city where shelters stood. The rain-washed air smelled of damp stone, and the sky was soft with twilight. Inside one shelter, he found children gathered around long tables, eating soup with worn spoons. Their laughter mixed with the sound of bowls clattering. And there, sitting quietly with her bowl, was Lily. She saw him instantly. Her spoon froze in mid-air and her lips parted in disbelief. For a second, she looked afraid, like he might be here to take away even this small comfort. But then slowly recognition softened her face. "Mr. Alexander," she whispered, as though saying his name out loud might break the fragile moment. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Lily, I've been looking for you." Her eyes widened. "Looking for me?" "Yes," he said, kneeling down so that their eyes were level. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said that morning. About cleaning my shoes just to have food. No child should ever feel that way." She clutched her bowl tightly, as though it might vanish. "I didn't mean to bother you. I was hungry." Alexander's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her that she wasn't a bother, that she mattered more than she could possibly understand. But the words caught in his chest. Instead, he smiled gently. "I know. And I want to make sure you don't have to feel that hunger again." Lily blinked. Her voice small. "But why me? You're a rich man. People like me don't matter to people like you." The honesty of her words cut through him sharper than any boardroom betrayal ever had. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. A card with his company's crest. "You matter, Lily. More than you know. I can't change the whole world, but I can start with you." She stared at the card, confused. "What's this?" "It's a beginning," Alexander said. "I want you to come tomorrow, to my office. Don't be afraid, I promise it's safe. I want to make sure you have a future that doesn't depend on scraps." For a long moment, she said nothing. The other children around her laughed and ate, unaware of the quiet shift happening between them. Finally, Lily's voice trembled as she whispered, "Do you mean it? You won't change your mind tomorrow?" Alexander's chest ached. He could see how many promises had been broken in her life before. He nodded slowly, firmly. "I won't change my mind. Not tomorrow. Not ever." The shelter's dim lights flickered above them, but inside, Alexander felt something brighter stirring. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profit margins or deadlines. He was thinking about a little girl who believed the world didn't care about her. And how desperately he wanted to prove her wrong. As he stood to leave, Lily's voice followed him, soft but filled with a new kind of hope. "Mr. Alexander, thank you." He turned back, meeting her gaze. "No, Lily. Thank you." And as he walked into the night, Alexander knew this was no longer just about charity. It was about a connection he couldn't explain. About a purpose he hadn't realized he was missing. He was ready to change her life, but deep down, he already knew she was changing his. The next morning, Alexander woke up before dawn. The city was still quiet, the first light of the sun casting a soft glow across his penthouse. Today was the day he would take the first real step toward changing Lily's life. His mind raced with plans, school enrollment, safe housing, and a proper routine. But he also felt a nervous excitement. It wasn't every day a man like him took responsibility for someone else's life in such a personal way. He dressed quickly, making sure his tie was straight and his coat sharp. But his thoughts were elsewhere, already imagining Lily's face when she saw the safe, warm place he had prepared for her. He knew she had learned to trust very few people, and he wanted her to feel that trust from the very first moment. When he arrived at the shelter, he found Lily waiting outside, clutching the small card he had given her the day before. Her eyes were bright with a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. "Good morning, Mr. Alexander," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Good morning, Lily," he replied warmly. "Are you ready?" She nodded, still holding the card tightly. I think so." Alexander knelt down and took her hand gently. "I promise, Lily. Today you'll see that there's a world where you don't have to worry about food or shelter. Where you can just be a child." Her small fingers wrapped around his firmly, and together they walked toward his car. On the way, Alexander kept glancing at her, noticing the way her eyes followed every detail. The street signs, the people walking, the cars passing. Everything was new. And he wanted her to know that it was safe to look, to explore, to imagine. The ride was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the engine. When they arrived at his mansion, Lily's mouth opened in awe. The gates, the gardens, the tall windows, it was overwhelming. She hesitated at first, unsure if she really belonged here. Alexander crouched down to her level and smiled. Lily, this is your home now. You are safe here. Everything you see, it's yours to explore, to enjoy, to call your own. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered. It's so beautiful. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. You deserve this, Lily. You deserve more than anyone should have to struggle for at your age. Inside, the staff had prepared a small breakfast for her. Warm pancakes, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit. The kind of meal she had never taken for granted. She sat at the table, her hands trembling slightly as she began to eat, savoring every bite. Alexander watched her quietly, feeling a mixture of joy and an ache he hadn't known in years. After breakfast, he led her to a cozy room that had been prepared just for her. Soft colors, a warm bed, books, and small toys. Everything was meant to make her feel safe and welcome. Lily explored slowly, touching the curtains, the shelves, the bed, her eyes wide with wonder. Is this really mine? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander smiled. Yes, Lily, it's yours. And no one will take it away from you. You are home. She sank onto the bed, hugging a small pillow tightly. No one has ever done this for me, she murmured, tears brimming. Alexander knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. From now on, things will be different. You'll have a chance to learn, to play, to grow. And I'll be here with you. Every step of the way. For the first time in her young life, Lily felt hope that wasn't fleeting. And for the first time in years, Alexander felt a warmth in his heart that no wealth, no building, no deal could ever give him. As the sun rose higher, spilling golden light into the room, Alexander knew this was more than an act of charity. It was the beginning of a life-changing bond. And deep down, he realized that Lily would change him just as much as he would change her. The following day, Alexander decided it was time for Lily to experience a normal routine. Something every child deserved but she had never known. He personally drove her to a nearby school he had arranged for her enrollment. The car ride was quiet at first. Lily staring out the window in awe at the bustling streets, the trees, the people moving about their lives. Alexander glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Excited? He asked gently. Lily hesitated, then nodded. A little, but what if I don't know what to do? You'll learn, he assured her. Everyone starts somewhere. And I'll be right here, not far away, watching over you. When they arrived, the school gates stood tall, children running inside, their laughter echoing across the yard. Lily's hand tightened around Alexander's for a moment, uncertain, but he squeezed back gently, offering silent courage. Here you go, he said, guiding her toward the reception. This is your new beginning. A teacher, waiting with a warm smile, took her hand and led her inside. Alexander watched from a distance as Lily hesitated at first, then slowly began to walk with her new teacher. The sight of her blending into a normal childhood, something so simple yet so extraordinary for her, made his chest ache with emotion. After leaving the school, Alexander drove through the city, thinking about the foundation he wanted to build. Not just for Lily, but for children like her everywhere. The idea of giving back, of creating opportunities, had never felt so urgent. He realized that true success wasn't measured in wealth or power, but in the lives one could touch and uplift. That evening, he returned to his mansion, where Lily had already begun exploring her room more confidently. She peeked into the garden, her eyes lighting up at the roses and fountains. Alexander followed, watching her joy unfold, a joy so simple yet profound. You like it? He asked softly. Lily turned, smiling shyly. It's beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. He knelt beside her. No, Lily. Thank you. You reminded me of something important, that life is more than what we build for ourselves. It's about caring for others too. For the first time in years, Alexander felt a peace he hadn't known existed. Watching Lily laugh as she ran through the garden, hearing her tell him small stories about her day, he understood that he had found a new purpose. That night, As he looked out over the city skyline from his office, Alexander made a silent vow. He would ensure that Lily had every opportunity to live a life full of hope, learning, and love. And he would do whatever it took to protect her from the struggles she had faced for so long. Because now, he realized, the richest part of his life wasn't in his fortune or his empire. It was in the small hand of a little girl named Lily, who had taught him the true meaning of compassion. The following morning, Alexander woke up early, the city still wrapped in a soft dawn light. Today was different. He felt an energy he hadn't experienced in years. His mind was focused on one thing, ensuring Lily's world was changing for the better, step by step. After breakfast, he drove Lily to school once again. She was calmer today, less hesitant, more curious. On the way, she chattered quietly about the little things she noticed, trees, birds, and the colors of the buildings. Alexander listened, a gentle smile on his face. When they arrived at the school, the principal personally greeted them. "Welcome, Lily," she said warmly. "We're so glad to have you here. You'll do wonderfully." Lily looked at Alexander, unsure how to respond. He knelt and whispered, "See, you're safe here, and you'll learn, laugh, and grow. I promise." After leaving her at school, Alexander returned to his office with a renewed sense of purpose. He called a meeting with his most trusted associates. Not about profits or mergers, but about building a foundation for children like Lily. He wanted shelters, schools, and food programs, real changes that would touch lives. Weeks passed. Lily began to thrive at school, making friends, learning new things, and smiling more freely than ever before. Alexander visited her often, helping with homework, listening to stories, and slowly realizing that his world had expanded far beyond boardrooms and skyscrapers. One evening, as they walked in the garden, Lily suddenly stopped and looked up at him. "Mr. Alexander," she said softly, "I feel happy, really happy. And safe. Thank you for not giving up on me." Alexander knelt to her level, taking her small hands in his. "No, Lily. Thank you. You gave me something no money or empire ever could. A chance to see what really matters. You reminded me of kindness, hope, and love." A tears filled her eyes, and Alexander felt his own vision blur. For the first time, he realized that life's true riches weren't counted in dollars or deals. They were measured in moments like these. Months later, Alexander officially launched the Lily Foundation, named in honor of the little girl who had changed his heart forever. The foundation provided education, shelter, and food for hundreds of children, giving them hope and opportunities they had never dreamed of. And Lily, she grew strong, confident, and joyful. Her laughter echoed through the halls of Alexander's mansion, her curiosity endless. Her eyes always shining with the light of someone who had been given a second chance. One quiet evening, Alexander stood by the window of his office, watching the city lights flicker below. Lily's laughter drifted up from the garden, and he whispered to himself, "This is why I was meant to meet her. This is why she came into my life." He realized that in saving her, he had saved a part of himself he had long forgotten. The part that believed in love, compassion, and the power of hope. And as he watched her run across the garden, carefree and smiling, he knew this was only the beginning of a life filled with joy, purpose, and endless possibilities. Because sometimes all it takes is one small hand to change an entire world. 2. We hope you enjoyed this story. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button if it moved you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what this video taught you. Or share any experiences similar to Lily's. And don't forget to share this story with your loved ones. Thank you for giving your valuable time. It truly means a lot.